This is a recent book I've heard about, uh, published a few years ago, celebrating the 100th anniversary of Dubliners. It's an Irish book. I'm going to order it. It's a retelling of the stories or some such. Well, hello, and welcome back to Dubliners 2019. We're on a painful case, and I'd like to thank Brian for doing the video to this first. It's been a week, but don't think that I haven't been thinking about this story hard for all week. As I mentioned, this is at least my third time through Dubliners, but and every time is different and blah blah blah. But this time, with the advent of the internet, it's been so easy to find things and look up articles in the James Joyce Quarterly, and so if I don't do this video now, it's going to end up being way too long. And it wasn't clickbait about Mr. Duffy being a candidate, one of the top candidates for the man in the Mac in Ulysses, one of the great mysteries in Ulysses. And Ulysses to me is like the Beatles in a way, and especially Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, and like the mysteries in that, like the cover alone, who's in it, and there's a lot of Paul is Dead at 28. So yeah, the man in the Mac. And Mrs. Sinico's funeral, Bloom attended in Ulysses in episode 6, Hades. He thinks about her funeral, and he sees the man in the Mac attending the funeral, which brings me to the point, what happened to Mr. Duffy after the story. Now, Brian makes a interesting... So here I'd just like to show you the Hades, the 6th episode of Ulysses. We've got Martin Cunningham and Mr. Power, Jack Power from Grace appearing in the story. And toward the end, here is where Bloom thinks about Mrs. Sinico. And these are all old notes of mine, but I have a note, a painful case, but he's talking about suicide here, and Bloom is in his mind about his father's suicide. And let's see, we've got Robert and Marie, the famous, well, and what is cheese? The corpse of milk? Anyway, I digress. We're talking about Dubliners, not Ulysses. I'd also like to say here that in Ithaca episode 17, Bloom thinks of Mrs. Sinico's suicide as an accident. Story. Now, Brian makes a interesting point about possible latent homosexuality, and I can see his point. I don't agree with it, but that's the thing about being a Joycean and Joyce studies. There was I was talking to Brian about in the mid 90s. It seemed to me, I was in grad school, there was an influx of like queer Joyce studies. There were books about it and a lot of articles. So like someone could take that aspect of a painful case and go with that. I'm gonna say it's a video in itself about the characters in Dubliners that later appear in Ulysses, and like I say, I'll say it again, the gateway to Ulysses is through Dubliners. Okay, here we go. I might rename this something like put on your snorkels, we're going down deep now. So I'm just gonna kind of read just off the top of my head, my notes. Get your texts out. Chapelizod, okay, that's where he lives. Chapelizod is like a suburb of Dublin. It's where the Earwicker family live in Finnegan's Wake. They have a pub there, and won't get into Tristan and Isolde, the myth. You can if you want. I like how the opening sentence. Start with that. Mr. James Duffy lived in Chapelizod because he wished to live as far as possible from the city of which he was a citizen, and because he found all the other suburbs of Dublin mean, modern, and pretentious. Now, modern. So he likes the old ways. Take that sentence and over here, compare it to this. Again, he lived at a little distance from his body, regarding his own acts with doubtful side glances. He had an odd autobiographical habit which led him to compose in his mind from time to time a short sentence about himself containing a subject in the third person and a predicate in the past tense. He never gave alms to beggars and walked firmly, carrying a stout hazel, like a walking stick, right? That's what gentlemen carry. An ash plant. That's what Stephen Dedalus carries, a poet. It's also good for defending ruffians. And like I said, Mr. Duffy is taken after Joyce's brother Stanislaus in looks and that. He, picture him like that. So he's a well-to-do guy, I mean, look, without going too deep in here, his bookshelf, Wordsworth, okay, romantic poet. This Maynooth Catechism, that's what they use. It's a seat of St. Patrick's College. It's the principal institution in Ireland for training the Roman Catholic clergy. It was founded in 1795. It's a big book, It's not easy reading. It seems like Duffy is translating this Michael Kramer stage directions on that. That's a German text, a drama. It ends in death. It's a romantic, I guess, I've never read it, a passionate drama. Okay. Mr. Duffy is described, a medieval doctor would have called him saturnine. So that means sad, melancholy, alone. Something about Wordsworth writing his best work when he was young. His later poems weren't as good. So if Duffy was a real aficionado, he wouldn't have had the collected works or the complete works of Wordsworth. He would have had like an anthology. Let's get into this. Yeah, Mr. Duffy's a major stoic. I mean, he just denies himself everything. Uncarpeted floors, everything's black. Even his name, Duffy, Dublin, the root is black, Blackpool. That's what Dublin is, you know, Duffy, black and white. So I think there's a scarlet thrown in there somewhere, purple. He has a comfy life. He has a great job, or not a great job. He's got a good job. He eats well at a pub. You know, he drinks some beer. He's not that much of a tight ass. He's just he denies himself. I heard a definition of wealth is you can go into any mall and buy anything you want, but then you don't. But he has a spiritual life of his own. Let's see, you know, he visits relatives at Christmas, escorts them to the cemetery. At the end of the story, I mean, my God, it goes like his father died and he got a promotion at work and life goes on, da-da-da. You know, it's 100 years ago, people, so the norms were, you know, a lot different. It's where, you know, a touch for a married woman to touch, you know, her escort's chin or whatnot in affection was, you know, enough to maybe put a gentleman back. And there's no other, getting back to what Brian was talking about, maybe his latent homosexuality. It's not evidence in here. I mean, there's no other real mention of it or any kind of, you know, Joyce would have put a hint in there about it, and there really is nothing. Okay, not much evidence, but we're coming up on Brian's evidence. We're at the point, again, meeting her a third time, the threes again, at her house with Captain Seneko. Doesn't know what's going on. He's clueless, you know, just an unattentive husband. But 4 years pass after the, you know, she caught up his hand passionately and pressed it to her cheek. Well, now, you know, he didn't visit her for a week, but then he did write her, set up a meeting, and they spent 3 hours talking about it. They agreed to break off their intercourse. And 4 years passed. Long time. In that time, he stopped going to musicals, and he started reading some Nietzsche. And here we have the line, you know, it reminds me of Oscar Wilde's The Love That Dare Not Speak Its Name, in a way. But does it mean, think back, 1906, doesn't mean he's latent homosexual. I don't think so. He's a stoic. You know, now Mrs. Senenko, she only says 2 sentences of dialogue in this whole story, and that's this one. I can, come on. What the fuck? Fucking pissing me off. Oh, fuck. Right. You know, that's really... What a pity there is such a poor house tonight. It's so hard on people to have to sing to empty benches. It's only dialogue. So yeah, she's a married woman, and there's some weirdness with her husband. Her husband takes her for granted. I mean, my God, Duffy goes back to her house even, and her husband thinks what he's interested in the daughter. Huh? It really is a sad story, and I can certainly understand having feelings for a woman and like maybe a colleague or something, you know, becoming friends, and perhaps she's married and that, and I'd be hesitant to take it further. That's just kind of me. So I understand the how, you know, love between a man and woman, da-da-da. So here's the epiphany. he's, thinking about what happened and how was he to blame. Here we have like a narration shift too, going inside Duffy's head. And let me just tie it up with this. The proprietor served him obsequiously. Good word. The Chapaliza Bridge is now the Anna Livia Bridge. You'll be happy to know. And life imitates art in that Joyce, as he was adapting the real story of this accident at Sydney Park, he chose not to use the real name of the engine driver, as he'd already used it in the first story, The Sisters. The train engine driver's name was James Flynn. Okay, talk to you later. Thank you. I also just wanted to say that Mr. Duffy is based on Joyce's brother Stanislaus, who wrote a great biographical book called My Brother's Keeper. Joyce used Stanislaus in a lot of ways, for characters and for support and for money. And I also wanted to mention that Flann O'Brien, the Irish writer, who I just read and reviewed his short fiction, a book on his short fiction, and he apparently wrote a parody that I'd like to read called John Duffy's Brother. And John Duffy died on the day he was born, or something like that. Flann O'Brien is like that. He only wrote under 7 pseudonyms. But back to